it's not that people are closed-minded per se. It's just that when you are doing something, you're in the routine of doing it, and it's bringing you joy in a different way, right? So the way that I found inspiration through Star Wars, for example, is I love watching Star Wars. I love consuming Star Wars content, but then I allowed myself to open my mind to find touch points to my life to allow myself to be inspired.
I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Today's guest is Arda Öcal, a prominent host for NHL on ESPN and SportsCenter anchor. Arda Öcal is a well-respected figure in the world of sports broadcasting, known for his in-depth knowledge, engaging presence, and passion for hockey. As a host for NHL on ESPN, Arda brings fans closer to the action, offering insights and commentary that highlight the excitement and nuances of the game. His role as SportsCenter anchor showcases his versatility and ability to connect with audiences, making him a trusted voice in sports media. With a career spanning over a decade, Arda has covered a wide range of sports and events, earning a reputation for his professionalism, enthusiasm, and storytelling skills. His journey from local broadcasting to becoming a national voice on ESPN is a testament to his dedication and love for sports. Join us as we dive into Arda Öcal's impressive career, learn about the world of sports media, and get insights into the evolving landscape of hockey coverage. Well, I am super excited for our conversation today with Arda Öcal. As you all know, I'm a big hockey fan, and he is a host for NHL on ESPN. In addition, he is a Sports Center anchor. So we're going to talk a lot about joyful things like sports and hockey today. So welcome to the show, Arda.
Larry, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, anytime I have a chance to talk hockey and sports, it's always joyful. That's true.
Starts off the day really, really well. So, listen, Arda, we want to spend a good amount of time on what you're doing today with ESPN for the NHL and Sports Center. But I'm always fascinated by people's journeys on how they got to where they are today. So, could you take a few minutes and share your journey to getting to where you are today?
Absolutely. I took a very conventional route to broadcasting. I got a degree in mathematics,
Me too.
as all, there you go, as all broadcasters do. After that, broadcasting was never really a life goal, especially early in my life. I always thought that like I grew up in Canada. I watched Hockey Night in Canada. I loved people like Ron McLean and the Sports Center anchors in Canada on TSN. Back then, I thought they had cool
Right.
jobs, but I never thought that I could have that job because I didn't have any friends or family in the industry, and I really didn't know how those jobs were procured. I just didn't. Didn't have a clue. So when I look back on it now, like I caught the bug doing like the morning announcements in high school, and I thought it was really cool. And in college, while I was chasing the math degree, I went to the local newspaper and wrote columns and became a features editor and things like that. I did that for several years. And then I went to the local public access radio station, which was connected to the campus. Uh, I went to the University of Waterloo, which is about an hour of outside of Toronto. And I did everything, organized tapes back in the day. You and I would know that certainly. And then, filled in on morning shifts and whatever was available. And it was fun. Like I did it because it was fun. It felt more like a hobby than being on track to getting a job. Again, because I just didn't know. So when I got a job, a desk job, I was a project manager for Dun and Bradstreet for a couple years. And while I was doing that, I nights and weekends I would go to the local community television station. It was called Rogers TV, and it was in my community. And I just went there and said, "Hey, I enjoy being around here. Like, I just want to absorb all of this." And they said, "Sure, you can do that, but you have to volunteer for us." So that's where I started to drive their community cruiser van to local charity events, right? Setting up a tent, and here's a wheel that you can spin, and you get little gifts as a result. Like here's a pen, here's a lanyard, whatever.
You really started from the ground up, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and that's where I caught the bug, exactly. And then about mid-20s, like I figured, like I was pretty good with my money. Like I didn't overspend. I had built enough that I felt like maybe I can scrape by for a couple years at least to like because it was still in me.
Right.
By my mid-20s, I was like, I think I really have to pursue this because I'm not stopping. It's more fun than my actual job, and so I owe it to myself to not look in the mirror when I'm 60 and say, why didn't I pursue it when I was younger, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to scrape by. I have enough to eat and enough to live, and I'm going to pursue this. And if it works out, if I get incrementally better every year and I see the light at the end of the tunnel, realistically, then I'm going to continue.
Right.
But if not, then I'll say I tried. I can go back to doing project management work or something to that effect. So that's what I did. And then luckily, it's been working out year by year. It's not a linear journey, of course, but it has been overall quite the thrill.
Yeah, amazing. And I think you bring up a good point, which is talked about very often, right? We only can dream and think about things we have a tendency that we're exposed to. So I think you make a great point that we need to expose kids, youngsters, to as many opportunities as possible to show them that all these things are possible, right? Because you may have taken a little bit of a different trajectory had you thought it was possible from the very beginning.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think about this all the time when I hear second generation, third generation athletes,
Hmm.
right? Like take hockey players. Like I'm pretty sure that Matthew and Brady Tkachuk, for example, they grew up around hockey. They
Right.
were in locker rooms at a young age. Hockey was in their blood. They're building a royal family, with their father Keith, of course. So but like my point there is they probably not assumed, but like they were able to dream about it and envision it at an early age. And they had a path that they could follow
Right.
because their father followed that path. And so, they earn their spots. They're very good hockey players, but there's something to be said about that early the dreaming early and also the visualization and being in the environments and soaking it all in. Like it's invaluable experience. It's invaluable life lessons for sure.
Yeah, agreed. And you've done something that I think, so many, who love sports really dream of, right? I mean, how many kids I know growing up, I can think of 3 or 4 right now that, when watching TV, they were like, "Man, I wish I could do that one day." And you actually did. You became an ESPN broadcaster. You know, was within the role from that starting as that going out and promoting the radio station to getting there, it's never a linear path, and yours was no different. What were some of the trials and tribulations that you saw along those ways?
I mean, it's a very very volatile and uncertain business, right? Like it constantly changes, it constantly shifts in different ways. I mean, who knows what the future of broadcasting is going to be as we talk in 2024 or 2025, right? Like in this era, we just have no idea. And I mean, I've definitely had a very winding road to get to ESPN, to even get a job at ESPN. I had several rounds of interviews. I called them the interview car wash, where I went in probably 3 or 4 times and talked to 10 to 12 different people. But when I look back on it, that was invaluable experience. And I tell people that ask for advice or mentorship all the time. Like everyone's path is different. Some people will have it easier than others, but that doesn't mean that it should discourage you in your path. And mine was very long and winding, and had a lot of speed bumps on the road. But the big thing is the perseverance. If you truly want it and you're committed to it, then it's going. Eventually, it's going to work out in some way, shape, or form.
Makes you super grateful for the process too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And believe me, there's no more grateful person for their position in broadcasting than me. There's a group, many of us that are very grateful, but I'm certainly extremely grateful because I had to work hard
Right.
for it. I had to put the time in. I had to, endure a lot of setbacks and persevere through them. So that teaches you the character for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of those for a second. And, I want you to share because I found this extremely interesting when you talked about, or I've seen you talk about that you considered at some point early on in your career changing your name to Adam. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah, so early on in my career, I just was, knocking on doors, not getting anywhere, not getting responses, etc. And I was inspired by, Hollywood actors often do this. There's a long history of, actors that have changed their names, stage names, for different motivations. In particular, Cal Penn, whose name is Cal Penn Modi, he just changed, split apart his first name and made a stage name out of it. I was reading an article with him, and he said, half jokingly with my friends, I thought changing my name to Cal Penn would essentially sort of, help me get more auditions. And I know that he said it tongue in cheek. He still ended up doing it, obviously. And I thought about it, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Like that's how I feel.
Right.
And so I figured maybe if Adam was sending demo tapes and resumes, that Adam might get more auditions. And so, I sent a few rounds as Adam, and I didn't like results were mixed. It wasn't like, suddenly I got 1,000 responses or anything like that, but the paradigm shift thought was definitely there. I'm glad, looking back on it now, that I didn't do that. Maybe a part of that was because I was a little discouraged, or maybe I felt at the time that uniqueness and culture was something to shy away from.
Right.
And now I don't feel that way anymore, and I feel like it's embraced and celebrated. And so maybe it was a sign of, coming up at that particular time of 15, 20 years ago. But I certainly am glad that I didn't do that.
Well, times are definitely changing, and well, I should say they are changing and have changed over that period of time as well. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it too. And glad you were able to keep your name as well. So how did it feel? How did it feel, and how did it shift your perspective on your craft that first time that you hosted Sports Center? I mean, that had to be like, wow.
Oh, it was a fantastic moment. Definitely a career highlight. This was May of 2021, and it was something that I never envisioned. When I got hired by ESPN, that wasn't even on my radar, and nor did I know how to even apply or raise my hand for something like that. I got hired by ESPN full time in 2019. I started part time in 2016, and my role was going to be focused on esports, on sports betting, and on soccer. And now I do a much different role. But that just speaks to the nature of the business and the fluidity of the job, and say yes to everything. Certainly I have that mentality, and many others do as well. But when in at that time, someone went to the executive team and said, why don't you consider Arda to uh, be a part of the Sports Center roster? And then I got the call, and basically I shadowed every Sports Center, and then it was finally time for me to do one. And I think, like, I felt the weight of it, absolutely, because
Right.
Sports Center is an institution. Like, even if you don't watch it
Hmm.
every day, the brand awareness is what probably nearly everyone in the United States, at the very least, knows what Sports Center is. It's probably among the most recognizable names, shows on television in television
Sure.
history. It's been around for over 40 years, just as long as ESPN's been around. So, I felt the weight of that. And the biggest thing is in my head at the time was, I just don't want to mess this up. Like, I don't want to be the guy that ruins. And looking back on it, it's a silly thought. Like, it's almost a selfish thought in a way, because you can't. Like, Sports Center is an institution. Like, if one bad show's not going to destroy the franchise, right? But
Right.
that's the weight that I put on myself, because I understood the enormity of it. And then in that, like, the first show was definitely a blur. Like, it was, like, you have the high of doing the show, and you just, like, but what I learned was, it's such a well oiled machine, and it's such a well produced show. It's definitely something that you learn a lot from. And yeah, like, it was an absolute thrill. Like, finishing the show, it was almost like, wow, like, I don't know if I'll, very few times in my career have I felt a high like that. after a show, a sense of accomplishment, and that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I'm sure you were wondering when the next one was gonna be,
Yeah.
or looking forward to that date on your calendar. And, listen, I know how, how difficult, we've had other people in the, entertainment world, or news world on our show. And so many people hear no and have a tendency to give up. And I think that you and I both understand that there is a power in the word no, and that it often means, somebody saying no just means no, not now. It's just not a good fit at this moment. How can people learn to find that power in no, like you have?
This is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to young people breaking into the industry. Oftentimes, when people hear the word no, they can't help but take it personally. It's their fault. It's as if they did something wrong. And no, Larry, you're the problem. No to you, Larry, specifically. And it's as if someone's pointing a finger right in their face and they're saying, no, never, goodbye, don't ever try again. Like that's how it feels sometimes when you hear the
Right.
word no.
Yes.
What you have to do, and you certainly realized this, and I know this, and a lot of people that I talk to, I try to pass this on to them is, like you said, no, 99% of the time means not now. And when you hear no, you have to step outside of the moment and think of every reason why that no was given to you. Is it because let's take a job for example. I've heard no hundreds, dozen, maybe 1,000 times by now in terms of applying for jobs. Was it they already had a candidate? Was it the job was eliminated in the process of finding someone? Was it the budget was cut? Was it maybe they did find a better candidate? Was it something, a detail in the negotiation? Someone was willing to move, or someone was a cheaper salary, or someone, whatever it was, some reason that doesn't necessarily have to do with you, Arda. It has to do with something else that was beyond your control. Once you realize that, it'll be a lot easier to stomach that no. And by the way, when you hear no, just like you said, what's stopping you from reaching out in a couple months or a few months and saying, hey, I know that the job didn't work out a few months ago, but I want to stay on your radar in case something opens up. That's the biggest thing. Like once people hear the word no, they just completely abandon the relationship or the conversation moving forward. And that's, to me, is one of the big mistakes that people make, because you should consistently keep that bridge open as long as you can. And who knows, maybe that person that said no to you suddenly becomes a mentor. Maybe that person that said no to you suddenly is helping you out in other ways. Oh, I've heard of this other person that's hiring. You just never know. And those possibilities exist.
Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool, it's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to mitlin.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together starting today. Yeah, I mean, maybe that person goes to a competitor, and they're hiring for the same role at that competitor, and they're like, "Hey, that guy Arda, he really impressed me. Why before we put this out to the public, maybe I'll reach out to him, see if he's available for this role." Right? It's a great way to build the network. And I think, like, almost when you hear that word no, you almost say to yourself, "No, not now," and why, right? And kind of put that messaging rather than the "it's you, you're bad, you're not," which is a difficult pill to swallow. So,
When people say you have to have a thick skin in the media industry, to me, a large part of that is dealing with rejection.
right,
Like you have to be Teflon in that situation. You have to understand that most of the time it's not about you, and you have to let the rejection deflect.
right.
Like it has to hit you, like, and you're wearing armor and it just like pierces off of you.
Superhero. Yeah.
Exactly. Parry it, deflect it, use your lightsaber, and, you know,
Get rid of it.
Attack,
So
exactly.
we'll talk about Star Wars in a little bit, but for now, you gave a TED talk entitled "I Draw Real World Inspiration from Things I Used to Escape." How did you come up with the TED talk? How did that come to be, and what did you hope the audience would gain from that conversation?
So I always wanted to do a TED Talk. That was in my head. It was a bucket list thing, and I attack my bucket list items pretty aggressively. I love collecting moments like that, and I was inspired by many TED Talks in the past. I think the series is awesome. I find a lot of the speakers to have really interesting things to say, and I wanted to be part of that conversation and have that on my resume. So I initially hosted a TED Talk, so I was the MC for a TED Talk at my alma mater at the University of Waterloo a few years ago. And then last year they invited me to speak, and I didn't have a topic. They reached out to me and they said, "Would you be willing to be one of our speakers this year?" The theme essentially is hope and change and inspiration. And I said, "Sure, say yes to everything." Like, how often am I going to get these kinds of opportunities, right? So I said yes. And so I said, "Okay, well, now I have 4 months to put together a TED Talk." And so I asked a lot of people for advice, and one of the pieces of advice I got was, why don't you think of incorporating things you love and figure out a way to turn that into inspiration? And so that's where I draw inspiration, real world inspiration from things I use to escape the real world. That's where that concept came from. I figured, okay, I love hockey, I love Star Wars, and I love video games. Why don't I incorporate them all and find the inspiring things in them, and all the while be as entertaining as I can be and also informative. And so that's how I essentially attacked formulating the TED Talk. The toughest thing, Larry, I'll be honest. So in my line of work, I don't memorize things. I'm either writing for a prompter, or if I'm memorizing, it's one sentence, two sentence, maximum a short paragraph, especially for air, right? Or I'm ad-libbing,
Right,
right? I'm ad-libbing. I'm having a natural conversation. I don't remember the last time I memorized a 20-minute speech.
right.
25 years, maybe high school. Honestly, like I can't remember the last time I had memorized a 20-minute speech. That's what I was worried about the most, because I was like, man, there's going to be no prompter, there's going to be no confidence monitor, and so I'm going to be here without a net. I have to. So like I spent a lot of time memorizing the speech.
Listen, I am with you. I do have a TED Talk on my bucket list, or TEDx talk. But I, like you, I enjoy this medium very much so, which is very much unscripted and unprompted. I like going on news shows where sometimes what the questions are, and other times they kind of go off on a tangent. But I like thinking on the fly, and the one thing that is going to be a major challenge for me is exactly what you just mentioned, is trying to memorize a 10-20 minute conversation and kill it, and not mess up because I'm trying to think of what the next line is rather than delivering it in the best possible way. So I feel that pain. I feel it.
Yeah, I recorded myself. So I read it, I recorded myself, I uploaded it to YouTube, and I have a long drive to work. So I just pulled up the YouTube link and I listened to it in the car. So
Okay.
I'd put like well, actually not my earbuds. I'd turn up the volume and I just listened to the audio of it
Right.
as I was driving over and over and over again. And I was like, this kind of helped.
All right. Well, I'll take that tip. Thank you. And free tip for anybody who's thinking about doing a TED or TEDx
Yeah.
talk. So, this theme that you have of encouraging people to find inspiration in what brings them joy, and we're all about joy on the Mitlin Money Mindset. How can we encourage more people to do this? Because I think if they were able to seek out that joy, I think the world would be such a better and more inspirational place. So how do we do that? How do we inspire youngsters to start thinking, or even people who are, well into their career, to start thinking in that direction?
Yeah, I think you have to open yourself up to it. I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's not that people are closed minded per se. It's just that when you are doing something, you're in the routine of doing it, and it's bringing you joy in a different way, right? So the way that I found inspiration through Star Wars, for example, is I love watching Star Wars. I love consuming Star Wars content, but then I allowed myself to open my mind to find touch points to my life to allow myself to be inspired. And so it's not necessarily, wow, I'm really inspired by Darth Vader and how strong he is. And if there's people out there that are
Right.
inspired by that, cool. But what I mean is there's usually some sort of connective tissue because all stories are very much common themes,
Mhm.
right? So there's always common themes in any stories that are told. And so it's allowing yourself to find these, to be inspired by them, and to apply them into your own life, or even a sense of accomplishment. Like even in video games, for example, if you beat a level that you'd been trying to beat for a very long time, allow yourself to relish that sense of accomplishment, and how can you use that determination or willingness to succeed and apply that elsewhere. What caused you to want to do this thing, to finally adapt to do this thing and succeed, and how can you apply that to other facets of your life?
So you really just have to take a different perspective rather than it's just watching a movie or just playing a game. You have to look at that perspective of how can this assist me, help me, bring me joy and inspire me to do other things besides play more video games or watch more movies.
Yeah, exactly. Which if you're going to play more video games, if that's your big takeaway from this conversation is play more video games. Hey, Arda told me so. I guess so. But like I will say like it to me it's all about paradigms. Like paradigm shifting is probably among the strongest and most powerful things you can do in your life. Like if you allow yourself, because a lot of people are afraid of change. They're very set in their ways. They're very routine based and oriented, and routine is good. Like athletes talk about having a routine that they stick to on game days. Totally understand that, but they're also very coachable, so they're also able to change their paradigms on non-game days where coaches will tell them, hey, try this, work on this. And that's where the coachable aspect of it. And you can't be an elite athlete without internalizing that information, be wanting to seek out that information, and then improving as a
Applying it.
result.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, routine plus the ability to adapt and change your paradigm is a very strong combination.
Yeah, I agree. So, listen, we've talked about your love of video games and love of Star Wars. So, I have a question around each of those that I want to make sure we chat about. And you being a big Star Wars fan, my understanding is that a red-eyed, blue-skinned villain is one of your favorite characters. Can you share why that is?
Yeah, so in my TED Talk, it's basically the Star Wars portion of it circles around like you said, red-eyed, blue-skinned, handsome devil of a man who's named Grand Admiral Thrawn. So Grand Admiral Thrawn will probably factor into a lot of the upcoming projects. You saw him in Ahsoka and in Star Wars Rebels, the animated series. He is very much the post Darth Vader. He is not as strong. He doesn't use the force. He doesn't have any sort of power in that way. He's very smart. He's, a very one of the best military minds to ever exist. But the thing that I got inspired by, so to speak, or what the point that I made was he rose the ranks of the empire, being a non-human, which in the empire, it's not easy getting through the empire. Like they're very, it's a very, very difficult place to succeed, let alone as a non-human. So, he had to be that much better and that much smarter to rise the ranks to occupy essentially, one of the top positions in the entire empire. So, I just like everything about the character. I like my villains in Mensa, and he certainly would qualify. I like it when you have a universe like Star Wars, and many of the most famous and most popular characters are ones that have special and unique powers. And here's this character that, is evil, but is he evil? There's different motivations, but also he's just smart. So he's looking for ways to outsmart the most powerful people in the galaxy. And I like when he solves those Rubik's cubes.
Right. Going back to the mathematics, probably mind of
I
yours.
guess
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah. Probably.
perspective. So, it's probably no surprise. I'm going to ask you about, you being number one, a video game world record holder, right? So if you could share what that world record is, and then how the four levels of Mario Brothers are a life lesson for you.
So the video game record is NHL. There's two of them actually. One of them is NHL PA 93. That was the precursor to NHL 94, which is one of the most famous sports video games of all time. NHL PA
Yes.
93 is almost as good as NHL 94. It didn't have the team names though. That's why it's called NHL PA 93, where NHL 94 finally marries the Players Association and the NHL teams, and it's a complete National Hockey League game.
Interesting.
But most lopsided victory tandem. So it was me and a friend. We played together. That friend. Now, this is where I'm sort of pulling the curtain a little bit and saying maybe if there was ever to have an asterisk beside a world record. Now, I'm not saying that I don't deserve this because I was part of the attempt and I did score my lion's
Okay.
share. Like, I want to be clear. I did score about 45%. I'd say 40% of the goals, but my partner just happened to be the NHL 94 world champion. So if people are wrestling fans, maybe they might equate me to the Marty Jannetty to his Shawn Michaels and the Rockers, which fine. If you want to make that comparison, go ahead. But the fact is, Larry, I'm still an officially
You picked them.
recognized world champion record holder. So until you beat the record, come at me. All right? Come at me.
I think you're safe. I don't know many people who are still playing 93 NHLPA anymore, but I will tell you a couple of my boys do the NHL 94 move still on the ice from time to time. So, the cut in and cut in front of the goalie. So
Yep.
that little hack still works. So that's amazing. So, and then what was your learning experience from your beating all the levels of Mario Brothers also? What was the life lesson that you took away from that?
So like when you play Mario Brothers, like you don't really clue, like you kind of think about it, but you don't really clue into the formula that exists, and it especially exists in the newer games, or it's more pronounced anyway. It's almost like, okay, we have this new skill that Mario does. Let's say wall jumping. Okay, like that's very common in the 3D games. And so, okay, step one, let's introduce this concept in a safe area where Mario won't die so that the player understands how to do it. Maybe we'll even give them a tutorial on screen on how to do it. Then step two, you apply it in a very easy environment. Maybe there's no holes, like there's no pits. It's just one Goomba, something like that, so that you're applying it and you're getting a sense of confidence. Then step three, okay, well, now we're going to release you into the wild, and now you're going to have to figure it out. And you're going to have to beat the level through some combination or twists and turns, applying what you just learned. And then step four is the grand conclusion. So to me, that's actually a great metaphor for life, because you're going to fail and you're going to get back on the horse and you're going to try to apply what you're learning. And so I think it was obviously, like, through the process of writing the TED Talk, I flushed that out a lot more, but certainly subconsciously it was there. And I would argue that people that love Mario Brothers and played it extensively probably have that subconsciously in their minds because they went through it so often, because they love playing the game. They played the game as much as they did, and explaining it to them, they're probably like, yeah, we knew this all along, right?
Right.
I got a lot of those
Right.
comments like, yeah, that's pretty, like, isn't that what well-known information, like, isn't that common knowledge? Yeah, probably, but like, you played the game so much, so you feel that.
Sure, internalized it. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Arda, it's been a pleasure having you on. We ask each of our guests the same final question, which, like we've said a few times, we're all about joy on the Mitlin Money Mindset. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Hugged my kids, drank a big cup of coffee in my Grogu
There
mug.
you go.
Two things, right? Like, family obviously is gonna bring people joy in different variations. For me, it's my kids. That's just
Same.
something building. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Just building like the same routines, and also like things that we look forward to every single day, whether it's dinner or a bedtime story, or things that the kids get excited about, that in turn we get excited about. Like, those are things that bring me joy. But also just like taking a second to do things like this is silly, right? Like this mug here. I'll just use
Yeah.
this as an example, Larry. Like this is a silly mug, okay? I love Star Wars. It brings me joy. I don't get bothered if people are going to look at this and say you're a giant nerd. Please, yes, I am a
They
giant
rule the
nerd, and I'm okay with it.
world.
Yeah, and I'm okay with it, Larry. I'm totally fine with it. And I look at this and I'm like, yes, this happens to bring me joy. And look at my setup brings me joy. Okay, my midlife crisis was not to go buy a Rolex or buy a fancy car or anything like that. It was to build. You can kind of see it. It was to build an arcade from my youth. So I have a
Yeah, I
Street
see
Fighter
it.
machine and a NFL Blitz and a Star Wars pinball and the super checks that I grew up playing
Yeah,
in hockey arenas in Canada after practices. That was like our reward for a long practice. And I just wanted to walk in here. I don't even play them every day, Larry. I just turn
right.
them on
Yeah,
and then I just walk in and I just absorb the sounds. You know, when you walked into an arcade as a kid and you just heard
yeah.
like 100 different games and people putting quarters into the machines and like that brought me joy. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
replicate that here.
Replicate it. Yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah.
whatever brings you joy, just pursue it and seek it. And to me, it's a daily journey.
And at the end of the day, if anybody thinks you're a nerd, just say, "Hey, listen, my kids think I'm a rock star. They see me on ESPN all the time, and right?
My oldest doesn't care at all.
Fair
My
enough."
oldest is like, you're not Bluey, so we can discard you. But you're cool to them until they get older, and then I'm gonna relish the moments now that I'm cool, Dad.
There you go. Take every minute. So, listen, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes, but if people want to learn more about your story, connect with you, watch you, what's the easiest and the best way for them to find or connect with you?
Social media, you can find me on all platforms, at Arda on X, at Arda Öcal on Instagram, and find me on LinkedIn too. Like people send me messages all the time asking about advice about the industry, et cetera. I'm happy to answer all questions. You can find me there. I go through at least 10 or 15 of them a week, so I'm happy to. If you're pursuing broadcasting or considering it, and you just want an extra set of eyes or pieces of advice from someone in the industry, then please feel free to reach out.
Love it. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking out the time and sharing with our listeners today, Arda, and enjoy your day.
Larry, thank you very much for having me.
I want to thank Arda Öcal for being a guest on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Arda has taken his love of sports and combined it with his insatiable work ethic and desire to be successful to land on some of the largest stages for sports. You can learn more about his inspiration to be the best at what he does from his TED Talk, which I highly recommend you take a listen. Arda is a true example of someone that emits joy from his work. Arda Öcal and all that he's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find him can be found in the show notes.